So this is basically the opposite about talking about enterprise startups. It's the opposite of what everyone asked for this morning with we want to move faster, we want more data. So instead, I'm going to talk about product, and I'm going to talk about art. So the notebook on the left is a Moleskine. I bought it. I take notes in it. I got it specifically for that purpose. And the one on the right is one I made in an art books class. But I also use it to take notes in, but somehow it qualifies as art instead of as a product. And then to confuse matters further, I'm sitting next to Adam, and he has a notebook that's somewhere between the two because it still has like the embroidered spine and the like ruffled edge pages, but it's clearly also a product. So I want to get into that a little further. So I've been thinking about this product art continuum a lot since I started working at Kickstarter. So I started there a year and a half ago, and I had a lot of misconceptions about what Kickstarter was. It turns out when the tech press talks about Kickstarter, we talk about lots of wallets, we talk about light bulbs, we talk about the Ouya, we talk about Oculus VR, we talk about all these cool startup product things. And we talk about how Kickstarter is this platform for funding startups. That's not how Kickstarter thinks of itself. Kickstarter thinks of itself as an art company. You don't need to look very far to figure this out. If you go to your profile page, you'll figure out that there are 15 creative categories on Kickstarter, and 13 of them have nothing to do with technology whatsoever. They're things like art, comics, dance, and theater. And when I started at Kickstarter and I ran smack into that realization, I started trying to build features, and it was really hard to separate out what is it that artists need because they're doing this thing because they want to express something, and what is it people need to do to get funding for a business? And those were such different questions. So I kept trying to think about what is it that these things are and why are they different? When it comes down to it, the reason they're the same is they're all about making things. The only thing that's really different is the process. So we all know a lot about the product process. You have a roadmap, you have goals, you have metrics you're trying to move, you have customers and you're trying to solve a problem for. You tend to iterate and get feedback so you can make things better, or you might be doing it the old-fashioned way where you just make it once and then ask for feedback and then try to make it better very slowly. Art's kind of the opposite. When you do art, you don't actually ask anyone for their input. You just sit down and you start working on something and you try to do what you want to do. You don't ask anyone for feedback. You just kind of go until you think you're done, and then you put it out there and you see what the reaction is. It's a very different sort of experience. And when I started realizing how different this was, I was like, am I crazy? Have I just talked to the 3 artists who do it this way? So I started doing a lot more research into the process of what artists do. So I read this book, The War of Art, by Steven Pressfield. It's a book that's all about how serious artists do their work. And I think I took my favorite quote from that to read to you because I think it really summarizes what the artistic process actually is. The professional arms himself with patience, not only to give the stars time to align in his career, but to keep himself from flaming out in each individual work. He knows that any job, whether it's a novel or a kitchen remodel, takes twice as long as he thinks and costs twice as much. He accepts that. He recognizes it as reality. The professional steels himself at the start of the project, reminding himself that it is the Iditarod, not the 60-yard dash. He conserves his energy. He prepares his mind for the long haul. He sustains himself with the knowledge that if he can just keep those huskies mushing, eventually the sled will pull into Nome. So that's what the artistic process is. You start, and you keep going, and eventually you get there. And right now, this is probably sounding very crazy. And if someone had told me this a year ago and said this was a valid way to make products, I would have thought they were crazy too. But I'm going to show you the way we did it for one project at Kickstarter, and hopefully that will give you an idea of how you can actually see it in action. So the project we did this for at Kickstarter is the start page. We hadn't touched our start page since 2011, but it's one of the key pages on the site. It's the page that any creator sees when they first decide to start thinking about doing a project. It was really basic. It basically had a start button, but the start button didn't really tell you where you were going. And it had a video and had one paragraph. Anything that's below the fold, like anything in the gray box, was actually below the fold on almost every single computer, so people didn't even know there was more information on the page, and you could look at the analytics and no one ever really scrolled down. But I was a PM, and I was under the impression we were just redoing the stop page, and it wouldn't take very long, and I wasn't very concerned about the process because it seemed like not that big of a deal to me. But Perry and Yancey, 2 of our co-founders, really came from this artistic mentality of we needed to get this right, and this was one of the core things, and we were going to do it their process, and I signed on for that. So we talked about it internally for a long time, and eventually we just came to the conclusion that we wanted to have a vision for the page, but we didn't necessarily want to have a metric we wanted to move. It wasn't, we want more projects on the site. It wasn't, we want more people giving money. It wasn't, our overall numbers should increase. Instead, we came up with, we want to have a page that inspires people. We started from the Saint-Exupéry quote, if you want to build a ship, do not drum up men to gather wood, divide the work, and give orders. Instead, teach them to yearn for the vast and endless sea. So we started from this idea of, okay, how do we make this page that's really inspirational? The first version we did was super literal. You can actually read on the page, if you can see, it just says, we think everyone has a project in them. So we took our quote and we were like, okay, how can we directly tell this to creators? Like, you can do a project and you can do a project. And we decided this wasn't the right thing for us. We thought it felt a little bit like we were telling creators what to do instead of inspiring them. We felt it looked a little bit like every other web page out there. This wasn't right. This was just the first version. We actually ended up going through 11 major versions and a lot of minor versions before we actually decided to ship something. So I can't show you all of them, but I'm going to give you a smattering so you can see some of the different things we tried. So the first version after that we tried to sketch things. We were like, what would an interesting aesthetic be? Let's just try sketching everything on the page. Again, the issue here was we liked the aesthetic, but it ended up feeling, again, we were just telling creators things. We really wanted to be able to bring the creators furthermore. So then we made a version that was entirely videos of creators, and when you hovered over the bubbles, the videos would play. It was great in terms of bringing creators forward. It was really bad because when you scroll down the page, it was just like this random garbled of text mixed together because you didn't realize all the videos were going to start talking, and it was really unpleasant. So we realized that wasn't going to quite work, and we tried a version that instead you had to press play on all the videos, but when we did that, no one actually pressed play on any of the videos, and they didn't get any of the benefit anyway. So it was back to the drawing board again. So then we thought, let's go in a different direction. Maybe one of the things people are struggling with is the first page they see after they hit start is the scary guidelines page. Maybe they'll be more likely to get past that page if we help them be more attached to their fledgling project beforehand. What if they just pick their category first? So we created a version that had this interactive dropdown before you hit start. By the time we got to the 7th version, we'd finally come to the conclusion that perhaps we should demystify the product process and what's going to happen when you're actually running your Kickstarter project. So we started including screenshots of tools that we were going to use. We went as far as in this version, we actually thought we were going to build a fully interactive prototype of the build system we already had so people could play with it on the page. Then we realized that was a little silly because they could just play with the version that's already in project build. So it continued along like this. With each version we made, we realized things we hadn't thought of, things we wanted to share with creators, things could get better. And we kept adding things, and things kept getting better, and we felt pretty good, and we eventually set a ship date. I was excited about having a ship date because I'm a PM. No one else was very excited about the ship date, but they seemed to understand that it was necessary. The other thing about art, though, is when you're making something the art way, even if you have a ship date, no one necessarily cares. So, the other real secret that real artists know and wannabe writers don't. When we sit down each day and do our work, power concentrates around us. The muse takes note of our dedication. She approves. We've earned favor in her sight. When we sit down and work, we become like a magnetized rod that attracts iron filings. Ideas come, insights accrete. Unfortunately for the PM in this process, they will always happen immediately before you want to ship the product. So if you could play this video, that would be great. So 5 days before we were actually finally going to ship, our editorial director was like, wait, the most exciting moment if you're a creator on Kickstarter is when your project actually gets funded. And right now, nothing exciting happens when you get funded. We need to share in this exciting moment with them. So over the weekend, we pulled together this entire video, so when you got to the funded step in the project tools walkthrough, it would feel a little bit exciting for the creator too. I think the thing I like about this is because it was also the last thing that we did for the project. It ended up feeling celebratory for us too. It was like our nice little confetti video at the end. And it came together really nicely, and we did actually still manage to ship on the day we wanted to because the video team worked over the weekend. So after going through all these iterations, I wanted to show you the version of the page we actually ended up shipping. This is a little bit like the Ignite style thing because I recorded the video ahead of time, and now I have to talk at the same rate I scroll down the page, so we'll see how this goes. But we still wanted to have some sort of inspirational quote at the top, and we wanted to have a bigger green start button to call people to action. We felt like that was really important for getting people involved. From our dropdowns, we'd also realized that we cared a lot about mentioning distinct categories on Kickstarter and why those categories were different, which was that same tension I was thinking about when I started working there. So as you can see, you can figure out any of the 15 now categories and learn a little bit more. We went so far as to make sure we had a diverse range of project sizes as well. So Marina Abramovic is one of the example projects, and she's an artist who's exhibited at MoMA. But there's also a project from a creator in Minnesota who raised a few $1,000s to do his small project. In film and video, we included a film because we knew that would appeal more to film creators than other types of categories. Continuing on, we wanted to show how large Kickstarter was, but also how relevant it was to people near you. So it's not very exciting when you're in Brooklyn because there are a billion projects there. Same thing in San Francisco. But if you go to like Iowa, there'll be 2 projects, and you can see the 2 people in your hometown that have also done a Kickstarter project, so you can reach out to them and talk to them and ask for their advice. And we wouldn't have realized any of these things if we hadn't kept going for so many iterations and just kept working on it over time. We did still want to bring the creator voices forward, and we decided the creator voices were strongest when we were talking about community. We felt like it was disingenuous for us to say, we create this community for you, and better to have creator voices saying, hey, you get this community from Kickstarter. I already showed you this part of the walkthrough, but I like this part because it's particularly interactive. It also shows a bunch of different features. I like Get Feedback because Get Feedback was one of the few features we built very quickly. And I think that was very exciting. And we had a very long discussion about if it was inappropriate to have a text message from mom on this iPhone screen or not. And then at the end, there were all the things we still wanted to say that we didn't have a chance to say in our major sections. So we put together a long discussion for people who managed to get to the end so they could find out anything they would want to know. The last section of the page was for the people who managed to get all the way down there. We figured most people wouldn't, and if they had, they were probably pretty nervous. So instead of just saying start a project, we said start sketching a project. It goes to exactly the same place as the Start a Project button, but we thought it might help people who are worried about committing. So that's the page we ended up with. The thing I didn't tell you was this page. So the page we ended up with, I think, is great because if we'd done a product process at the beginning and I tried to ship what we had the first time around, we would have kind of hit this local maxima. Like things would have gotten better. We would have optimized. This slide animates, but I'm afraid to click the button. Let's see what happens. Oh, it works. OK. So we would have ended up there, and it would have been better, but it wouldn't have been great. And by taking this long time and going through all these iterations and doing it the art way, we really ended up with something that was a lot better, maybe over there. And now we'd be able to use a product process to optimize it even further. So the thing I haven't told you yet about this project that was very frustrating was that it actually took 8 months. And as much as I like the page that I showed you and I think it's really valuable, I'm not actually sure it's 8 months valuable. So I wanted to share a couple of the other things we got out of this process to justify why it took so long and why it was actually worth it. So first of all, it was the first time we as a company sat down to say, why don't people create? We talked to all our internal community managers, we talked to our outreach team, we talked to basically everyone in the company and a bunch of people who'd created projects before directly. And we have now a much larger database to draw from for reasons why people are afraid of using Kickstarter or afraid of doing their creative project regardless if it's on Kickstarter or not. And we can use that to inform all of our future creator work. Additionally, we ended up using lots of the elements from designs we did on the start page later on. So I'm particularly fond of how similar the light is from the original sketch with the perfume bottle for the number of backers named Grandma that we used in the $1 billion pledge. We started being able to pull the aesthetics we tried out in the start page into other parts of the site. Same thing with the creator video bubbles. We haven't done them with video yet, but we've started using the large circle creator face things to have testimonials from people around the site. And then finally, our dropdowns actually ended up moving into an entirely separate project. Now, when you hit the start button, instead of hitting a wall of guideline text, you hit a page where you can actually title your new project and pick your category. And it's a lot more exciting to see that than a list of don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. And I don't think we would have come to the conclusion that we could add that incremental step if we hadn't tried to do it within the start page. So again, the other question is metrics. I'm a PM. I tracked the metrics even though technically that wasn't what we were going for. And I can't give you any exact numbers, but I am happy to say that I think the numbers are way better than I would have expected if I'd started with an optimization process. I'm really impressed by how well the work turned out on an absolute scale. So this whole talk is to mostly say, now you can try this out too. It might sound a little bit scary. It's definitely not for every project. I've tried it for other projects that didn't necessarily go as well using this method. So I wouldn't do it for anything that's particularly time sensitive or something that's mostly engineering work or something where you already know the answer. The time to use this sort of artistic process is when you're trying to share something about your company, when you want to do your first about page, your team page, share your values, do something that's related to your core communications, and you have the time to be able to spend on it. That's a great time. It's also really good when you're exploring new areas and you want to do something new and you don't want to just go out and ask someone, hey, what do you want? It's a good alternate approach to that. So thanks.
On the left-hand side, you said that like the product way is good for engineering things. Yeah. I know a lot of engineers who consider themselves artists. Reaction?
No, that's definitely true. So everyone at Kickstarter usually primarily identifies as an artist before an engineer or a community person or anything else they identify as. I think I'm the only one who actually identifies as doing product stuff all the time. I think it's more about the method you go through to do it. So I think with engineering work, like when you are engineering something, you're usually trying to solve a problem. And when you're doing art, you usually are trying to express things. And I think it's more about which technique you use at each time.
Hi, Did you see any metrics for the iterations that you did in the art way along the way?
No, because we never shipped any of them.
Ah, got it.
That's the problem with the art way. I personally, if I was going to do it again, I would like to have actually shipped all of them and seen it as we went as well, but still continued to do that process. But
Cool. We'll take one more question.
I have a question about the 8 months.
Yeah.
How did you pitch the artistic way to say, like, we're going to do this until we're all happy with it? Or where you get pressure in like month 4, 5, or 6 to move ahead?
No, so that was the other way around. So I would pressure people. Like I was like month 1, okay, we need to ship this. It's been a whole month. And then like month 2, I was like, seriously, this is getting unreasonable. We need to ship this now. And I tried to apply that pressure from months 1 until months 8 unsuccessfully. So this is definitely something I did not buy at the beginning. I did not buy it when we were going through this process. I didn't buy it for 2 months after because it was really hard. And like only now looking back can I actually see the value we got out of it.
Cool. So I just want to give another big round of applause for Ellen.